How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Every Who down in Whoville liked Christmas a lot. But the Grinch, who lived just north of Whoville, did not. The Grinch hated Christmas, the whole Christmas season. Now please don't ask why. No one quite knows the reason. It could be his head wasn't screwed on just right. It could be perhaps that his shoes were too tight. But I think the most likely reason of all, and many may have been, that his heart was just 2 sizes too small. But whatever the reason, his heart or his shoes, he stood there on Christmas Eve just hating on those Whos, staring down from his cave with a sour, Grinchy frown at the warm lighted windows below in their town. For he knew every Who down in Whoville beneath was busy now hanging the mistletoe wreath. And they're hanging their stockings, he snarled with a sneer. Tomorrow is Christmas, it's practically here. Then he growled with his Grinch fingers nervously drumming. I must find some way to stop Christmas from coming. For tomorrow, he knew, all the Who girls and boys would wake bright and early. They'd rush to their toys, and then, oh, the noise, the noise, the noise, the noise. That's one thing he hated, the noise, noise, noise. Then the Whos, young and old, would sit down to a feast, and they'd 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 feast. They would feast on Who pudding and rare Who roast beast, which was something the Grinch couldn't stand in the least. And then they'd do something he liked least of all. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, they'd come together, the Christmas bells ringing. They'd stand hand in hand, and the Whos would start singing. They'd sing and they'd sing and they'd sing and they'd sing. And the more the Grinch thought of this Who Christmas sing, the more the Grinch thought, I must stop this whole thing. Why, for 53 years I've put up with it now. I must stop Christmas from coming. But how? How? And then he got an idea, an awful idea. The Grinch got a wonderfully awful idea. Wonder what it was. Well, we're going to find out. I know just what to do, the Grinch laughed in his throat. And he made a quick Santa Claus hat and a coat, and he chuckled and clucked. What a great Grinchy trick. With this coat and this hat, I'll look just like Saint Nick. All I need is a reindeer, the Grinch looked around. But since reindeer are scarce, there was none to be found. Did that stop the old Grinch? No, the Grinch simply said, if I can't find a reindeer, I'll make one instead. So he called his dog Max. Then took some red thread, and he tied a big horn on the top of his head. Ooh, this is getting good. Then he loaded some bags and some old empty sacks on a ramshackle sleigh and he hooked up old Max. Then the Grinch said, "Giddy up!" And the sleigh started down towards the homes where the Who's lay a snooze in their town. Then he slid down the chimney, a rather tight pinch. But if Santa could do it, then so could the Grinch. He got stuck only once for a moment or two. Then he stuck his head out of the fireplace flue, where the little Who stockings all hung in a row. Those stockings, he grinned, are the first thing to go. Then he slithered and slunk, with a smile most unpleasant. Around the whole room he took every present. Pop guns and bicycles, roller skates, drums, checkerboards, tricycles, popcorn, and plums. He stuffed them in bags. Then the Grinch, very nimble, stuffed all the bags, one by one, up the chimney. "You're a mean one, Mr. Grinch." Then he slunk to the icebox. He took the Who feast. He took the Who pudding, and he took the roast beast. He cleaned out that icebox as quick as a flash. Why, that Grinch even took the last can of Who hash. Uh-oh. Then he stuffed all the food up the chimney with glee. "And now," grinned the Grinch, "I will stuff up the tree." Even took the tree. That's nuts. And the Grinch grabbed the tree, and he started to shove, when he heard a small sound like the coo of a dove. He turned around fast, and he saw a small Who. Little Cindy Lou Who was not more than 2. The Grinch had been caught by this tiny Who daughter who'd got out of bed for a cup of cold water. She stared at the Grinch and said, "Santa Claus, why? Why are you taking our Christmas tree? Why?" But you know that old Grinch was so smart and so slick. He thought up a lie, and he thought up one quick. "Why, my sweet little tot, the fake Santa Claus lied. There's a light on this tree that won't light on one side. So I'm gonna take it back home to my workshop, my dear. I will fix it up there and bring it back here." His fib fooled the child. Then he patted her head, and he got her a drink, and he sent her off to bed. When Cindy Lou Who went to bed with her cup, he went up the chimney and stuffed that tree up. And the last thing he took was the log for their fire. He went up the chimney himself, that old liar. On the walls, he left nothing but hooks and some wire. He cleaned them out. Like nothing. And the one speck of food that he left in the house was a crumb that was even too small for a mouse. Then he did the same thing to the other Who houses, leaving crumbs much too small for all the Who mouses. It was 1:15 dawn. All the Who's were still in bed. All the Who's still a snooze while he packed up the sled. Packed it up with their presents, the ribbons, the wrappings, the tags, the tinsels, the trimmings, and the trappings. Poor Max. Pulling all that. Oh boy. 3,000 feet up the side of Mount Crumpet, he rode with his load to the tip-top to dump it. Poo-poo to the Who's was his grinchiest humming. They're finding out now that Christmas ain't coming. They'll just wake up. I know just what they'll do. Their mouths will hang open. A minute or two. Then the Who's down in Whoville will all cry, boo-hoo. That's a noise, grinned the Grinch, that I simply must hear. So he paused, and the Grinch put his hand to his ear. And he did hear a sound rising up over the snow. It started out low, and then it started to grow. But the sound wasn't sad. Why, that sound sounded merry. It couldn't be so. But it was merry. Very. He stared down at Whoville. The Grinch popped his eyes. Then he shook. What he saw was a shocking surprise. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, was singing without any presents at all. He hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. It came. Somehow or another, it came just the same. And the Grinch, with his Grinch feet ice cold in the snow, stood puzzling and puzzling. How could it be so? It came without ribbons. It came without tags. It came without packages, boxes, or bags. He puzzled 3 hours till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means something a bit more. Think he's onto something. What happened then? Well, in Whoville they say that the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. And the minute his heart didn't feel quite so tight, he whizzed with his load through the bright morning light. He brought back the toys, the food for the feast, and he himself, the Grinch, carved the roast beast. How the Grinch tried to steal Christmas. And Merry Christmas to all of you and your families. You're a mean one, Mr. Grinch. If the Grinch's heart can unthaw and grow back 3 sizes bigger than before, I think there's a lot of hope left for this world. In spite of all the stuff we complain about and talk about, I still believe in humanity. Not all of it, but a lot of it. If the Grinch can change, we can all change. Right, bro?
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.